In the heart of the red earth, where dust clung to skin like memory and the wind carried the voices of ancestors, stood Obodo Ukwu, an ancient African village stitched together by mud huts, thatched roofs, and tradition older than the tallest Iroko tree. At the center of the village rose the king's compound. It was not built of stone or gold, but of authority. Wide mud walls circled the palace huts, their surfaces marked with sacred symbols drawn by generations of priests. Cowrie shells were pressed into the earth at the entrance, and a carved wooden staff, the Ofo of Judgment, stood upright beside the gate, warning all who entered that truth lived here and lies died here. This was the domain of King Duka Okori, ruler of Obodo Ukwu for over 30 harvest seasons. And now he was dying. The news moved quietly at first, like a snake through dry grass. The king had stopped attending the morning councils. His voice, once thunderous enough to silence arguing elders, had grown thin. He no longer walked the village square at dusk to greet his people. Inside his private hut, the air was heavy with herbs and fear. King Duka lay on a raffia mat, his body wrapped in white cloth. His chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath sounding like it might be his last. The royal healer had tried everything: roots from the deep forest, oils pressed from bitter seeds, incantations whispered under the moon. Nothing held death back, yet the king's eyes still burned with life, not fear, worry, because Obodo Ukwu did not fear enemies beyond its borders. It feared chaos after its king was gone. King Duka had many children, but only two lived in his heart like fire and blood: Ikenna and Udoka, twins. Born on a night when thunder split the sky and the village oracle declared, 2 lions have entered the world from one womb. From childhood, the twins were inseparable. They learned to walk together, they learned to wrestle together, they learned to hunt, speak, and stand before elders together, yet they were not the same. Ikenna, the elder by minutes, was calm and thoughtful. He spoke less, watched more. He believed leadership was earned through patience and listening. Udoka was fire, bold, sharp-tongued, quick to anger, quicker to act. He believed a king must rule with strength and fear, not silence. Together they balanced each other, and together they were loved too much. The king never hid his affection. When the twins entered the palace courtyard, servants bowed deeper. When they spoke at council, elders listened longer. When disputes arose between them and other princes, the twins were forgiven first. Whispers followed them like shadows. They already wear the crown in their father's eyes. And King Nduka heard those whispers, but he ignored them, because a father's heart is louder than a king's wisdom. There was something the village did not speak of openly, a name rarely said, a child remembered only in silence. Years before the twins were born, long before Queen Ifunanya took her place as royal wife, King Duka had traveled beyond Obodo Ukwu's borders during a season of war negotiations. In a distant river community, he had taken a woman, not a queen, not a wife, a stranger. From that union came a son. The child was sent away with his mother, far from the palace, far from royal recognition. The elders advised silence. A divided lineage invites disaster. The king agreed, and so the boy grew without knowing his father's throne. But fate does not forget. On the 7th night of the king's illness, the village gong sounded at dawn, not the call for celebration, not the call for war, but the call that froze hearts. The elders' assembly was summoned. Men wrapped in faded robes gathered under the ancient Udala tree. Their faces were lined with age, their eyes heavy with unspoken fears. The chief elder, Okpara Maduka, struck his staff against the ground. "Our king walks the path of ancestors," he said, "but Obodo Ukwu must not walk blindly after him." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew what this meant. Succession. Tradition demanded clarity before death, not chaos after. The twins stood side by side, their shoulders nearly touching. For the first time in their lives, they did not look at each other. That night, King Nduka asked to see his sons. All of them. Torches lit the palace hut as princes gathered. But when the king spoke, his eyes rested only on Ikenna and Udoka. His voice was weak, yet firm. Blood alone does not make a king. Gasps filled the hut. The twins stiffened. "A ruler must carry the people's burden, not his own pride," the king continued. "I loved you both equally, perhaps too equally." Silence pressed down like stone. "Before I join my ancestors," he said, "you will face the trial of the 3 ways." The elders nodded grimly. This was no simple test. It was ancient, dangerous, and final. You will walk separate paths, the king said, and return with proof that you can rule without destroying this land. Failure meant more than shame. Failure meant disqualification. The twins exchanged their first look of the night, and in that look was something new. Not brotherhood, not trust, but fear. Later, under the moonlight, Udoka clenched his fists. "Why must we be tested?" he snapped. "The throne is ours." Ikenna said nothing for a long moment, then softly, "Because father fears we are not ready." Udoka laughed bitterly, "Or because he listens too much to weak elders." That night, something cracked, not loudly, but enough to let darkness seep in. And far beyond Obodo Uku's borders, in a village that did not yet know it mattered, a young man stared into a river and felt a pull he could not explain. The blood of kings stirred in him. The land was already choosing its future. The morning the trial was announced, Obodo Uku did not wake like it always did. There was no laughter from women pounding yam, no children chasing goats between huts. Even the birds seemed to perch in silence. The village breathed like a man holding back tears. At the center square, the sacred fire was lit before sunrise. Its smoke curled upward, dark and restless, as if the ancestors themselves were uneasy. The trial of the three ways had not been performed in 2 generations. Many who remembered it only remembered loss. The elders gathered in a half circle, their feet bare against the earth. Each carried a staff carved with symbols of their lineage. Chief Elder Okpara raised his voice. "Hear this, people of Obodo Ukwu." The crowd pressed closer. The trial of the three ways is not a contest of strength alone. It is a judgment of the heart, the mind, and the spirit. He turned toward the twins. "Each prince shall walk a separate path chosen by the ancestors. You must not help one another. You must not interfere with fate. And you must not return empty-handed." A pause. "Only one who completes his path with honor may sit on the throne." Queen Ifunanya clutched her wrapper tightly. Her eyes moved between her sons, her lips trembling, but she said nothing. A queen could not cry before the people. The three ways, the royal diviner stepped forward, his face hidden beneath chalk and red camwood. In his hands were 3 carved gourds. He shook them gently. Bones rattled, cowries clicked. The sound made children cling to their mothers. One gourd was marked with ashes, one with blood-red dye, one with river clay. The diviner placed them on the ground. "The way of wisdom," he said, pointing to the ashes. "The way of courage," he said, touching the blood-red gourd. "And the way of compassion," he said, resting his palm on the clay-marked one. The paths were not equal. Everyone knew that. Wisdom required patience and restraint. Courage demanded danger and sacrifice. Compassion tested mercy in the face of injustice. Many had failed by choosing what looked noble instead of what was right. Udoka stepped forward first. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning. "I will not pick last," he declared. The elders exchanged glances, but said nothing. He reached for the gourds. For a moment, his hand hovered. Then, he chose the gourd marked with blood-red dye. The way of courage. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "He wants glory. He wants to prove strength. That path devours men." Udoka lifted his chin proudly. "A king must be feared." Ikenna watched him, his expression unreadable. When it was his turn, he knelt first, touching his forehead to the earth in respect. Then he reached for the remaining gourds. His fingers brushed the ashes. He hesitated, and chose the gourd marked with river clay. The way of compassion. A quiet gasp escaped Queen Ifunanya's lips. Some elders frowned. "Mercy weakens the throne," one whispered. The third gourd, the way of wisdom, was returned to the shrine. Unused, unchosen. A bad sign. By tradition, the twins were not allowed to speak again until the trial ended. Not a word, not a glance. They stood side by side one last time as warriors tied protective charms around their wrists. Udoka's charm was thick with iron beads and animal teeth. Ikenna's was simple, woven fiber, soaked in river herbs. When Udoka turned away, he did not look back. Ikenna did, for just a heartbeat. And in his eyes was something Udoka did not see. Fear, not of death, but of what his brother was becoming. Udoka's path led east toward the forbidden forest of Ekwensu, where shadows swallowed men whole and the earth smelled of rot and blood. His task was clear. "Bring back the horn of the Black Forest buffalo," the diviner had said. "Alive or dead, but you must face it alone." The buffalo was a beast spoken of in whispers. It had gored hunters, crushed warriors, and trampled farms at the forest's edge. Udoka welcomed the danger. "I will return with its head," he told himself. But the forest did not bow to pride. By the second day, hunger gnawed at him. By the third, his charm had torn. By the fourth, he realized something was following him. Not the buffalo, something quieter. Watching. Waiting. At night, Udoka dreamed of Ikena sitting on the throne, crowned, calm, while he stood outside the palace gates, unseen. He woke each time with anger boiling in his chest. "I will not lose," he growled. But courage without wisdom is blind, and the forest was patient. Ikena's path led west, toward the river Umu Eze, where fishermen lived in fragile huts and life depended on mercy as much as skill. His task was different. Judge a dispute between strangers, the diviner had told him. Without knowing who is right, without using force, bring back peace. It sounded simple. It was not. The dispute was between two families. One accused the other of stealing fishing nets. The other accused them of poisoning the river. The tension was sharp. Knives were drawn. Children cried. Ikena listened. For hours, he asked questions no one wanted to answer. He refused bribes. He refused flattery. He refused threats. At night, he slept on the bare earth among the people. By the third day, he uncovered the truth. The nets had been stolen, but not by the accused family, by a hungry orphan boy who feared starvation. Ikena made his judgment. He ordered restitution, but he also ordered forgiveness. The villagers resisted. Mercy invites weakness, they said. Ikena stood firm. Justice without compassion creates more enemies than peace. Slowly, painfully, peace returned. But as he prepared to leave, a messenger arrived. Breathless, terrified. "Prince Ikena," the man said, "your brother Udoka, he has not been seen for days." Ikena's heart clenched. The trial forbade interference, but blood does not obey rules. The first broken law. That night, Ikena stood by the river, torn between duty and brotherhood. The ancestors were silent. The water flowed on, and in that silence, Ikena made a choice. A dangerous one. He turned east, toward the forbidden forest, unknowing that by doing so he would break the sacred law of the trial, and that the elders were watching. Far away, beneath twisted roots and moonless sky, Udoka screamed, not in fear, but in rage, as the forest finally revealed its price. The trial had only begun, and Obodo Uku's fate was already cracking. The forbidden forest of Ekwensu did not welcome rescuers. It swallowed sound, bent direction, and made even brave men doubt their own shadows. Trees rose like crooked elders, their roots clawing the earth as if trying to pull secrets back into the ground. When Ikena entered the forest, the air changed. The birds went silent. The winds stilled. Only his heartbeat moved. He knew he had broken the law of the trial, but he also knew something else. If Udoka died here, the throne would already be cursed. Udoka lay trapped beneath a fallen tree, his leg twisted unnaturally, blood soaking into the soil. The black forest buffalo was gone, but it had not fled. It had won. For 2 days, Udoka had dragged himself, cursing the forest, cursing his father, cursing Ikena most of all. "You were always the calm one," he spat weakly. "Let us see how calm you are when I die." When he heard footsteps, rage flared in his eyes. Then disbelief. "Ikena," his voice cracked. "You broke the trial." Ikena knelt beside him immediately. "You are alive," he whispered, relief flooding him. Udoka laughed, a dry, broken sound. "Alive? Look at me. I will never walk properly again." Ikena examined the wound. It was bad, but not fatal. If treated. "We can still save your life," Ikena said. Udoka's eyes hardened. "At what cost?" Silence answered him, because both brothers knew the truth. If Ikena helped him, both would fail. If Ikena walked away, Udoka would likely die. Brotherhood or crown. Only one could be chosen. Ikena tore a strip from his wrapper and bound Udoka's leg. He lifted him, ignoring his own shaking strength. "The throne is nothing if I lose you," Ikena said. Something snapped inside Udoka, not gratitude, humiliation. As they struggled through the forest, bitterness fermented in his chest. "So now you are my savior?" Udoka hissed. "The elders will call you noble. The people will sing your praise." Ikena said nothing. But silence can sound like judgment. By dawn, they reached the forest's edge, and that was where Udoka made his decision. As villagers approached to help, Udoka screamed. "He tried to kill me!" Gasps tore through the crowd. Udoka pointed a trembling finger at his brother. "He broke the trial to sabotage me. He wanted the throne alone." Ikena froze. "Udoka, what are you saying?" The elders arrived moments later. Chief Elder Okpara's face darkened. "Is this true?" he demanded. Udoka wept openly. "He left me under the tree. I crawled for days. He returned only when he feared I would survive. The forest does not testify, and truth without witnesses is fragile. Ikenna fell to his knees. I saved him, he said quietly. I broke the law because he is my brother. The elders exchanged troubled glances. Compassion had no place in this judgment. Only rules, only order. The verdict came before sunset. Both princes had failed the trial, but not equally. Udoka was declared unfit by weakness. Ikenna was declared unfit by disobedience. The throne was sealed. Queen Ifunanya screamed when she heard the verdict. You have destroyed my sons. But the elders did not flinch. The land must come before blood. King Nduka, barely conscious, was informed that night. Tears slipped from his eyes, not for the throne, but for the sons he had loved too much. Before dawn, the king's spirit departed. The drums beat slowly. Women wailed. The palace fire was extinguished, and Obodo Ukwu stood without a ruler. Tradition demanded that when rightful heirs failed, the forgotten bloodline must be summoned. The chief elder spoke the name aloud for the first time in decades. Bring Chukwudi, son of Nduka, born beyond these borders. The name fell like thunder. Ikenna heard it and felt the ground tilt. Udoka heard it and smiled faintly, because revenge had already begun. Far away, in a river community where huts leaned toward the water, Chukwudi was mending fishing nets when royal messengers arrived. He listened in silence as they spoke, of his father, of the throne, of Obodo Ukwu. He said nothing. That night, he stood by the river and stared at his reflection. So the crown remembers me now, he whispered. But beneath his calm exterior burned a long-held resentment. He had grown without a father, without protection, without a name. And now, the kingdom needed him. He would go, but not as a grateful son, as a man who would take what was denied. Ikenna was banished to the outer farms. Udoka was kept within the palace walls, but stripped of honor. They did not speak again. But at night, Udoka dreamed of fire and crowns, and Ikenna dreamed of blood on his hands that would not wash away. The land had chosen a new path, and when Chukwudi stepped onto Obodo Ukwu soil days later, the ancestors whispered, the true tragedy has not yet begun. When Chukwudi entered Obodo Ukwu, the village did not welcome him with drums. It welcomed him with stares. Women paused mid-step, children stopped playing, men rested their hands on machete handles just a little longer than necessary. He looked like them, dark skin, firm build, eyes shaped by the same sun. Yet he was not of them. He wore no royal beads, no palace scars, no ancestral markings, only a calm that unsettled people. The coronation was hurried, too hurried. Tradition demanded 7 days of cleansing rites. Chukwudi was crowned on the 3rd. The elders said it was to prevent instability. The people knew better. They were afraid. As the sacred crown was lowered onto his head, Chukwudi did not smile. He did not kneel to the earth like kings before him. He simply closed his eyes. And in that moment, memories flooded him. A childhood of hunger. A mother who died calling a king's name that never answered. A life lived outside protection while Obodo Ukwu prospered. When he opened his eyes, something had hardened. His first words as king were not of unity. They were of control. This kingdom will not be ruled by sentiment, Chukwudi declared. Blood failed you once. Order will not. He dissolved the advisory role of younger elders. He strengthened the palace guards. He placed spies in the village square. And most dangerously, he summoned Udoka. Udoka entered the palace limping slightly, bitterness etched into his face. He expected mockery. Instead, Chukwudi studied him, long, carefully. You were meant to be king, Chukwudi said. Udoka stiffened. So were you, he replied coldly. Chukwudi smiled faintly. No, I was meant to survive. He leaned closer. You hate the elders. I hate their hypocrisy. You hate your brother for being loved. I hate him for being chosen. Udoka's chest tightened. What do you want? He asked. Chukwudi's voice dropped. Help me rule, and I will help you destroy everything that took the throne from you. The alliance was sealed in silence. Not with blood, with resentment. Beyond the village center, where farms kissed the wild bush, Ikenna lived among peasants. He tilled soil. He repaired huts. He listened. And what he heard frightened him. Taxes doubled. Men were flogged for speaking too freely. Shrines were dismantled if they did not align with palace decrees. Obodo Ukwu was changing, not loudly, but violently. At night, Ikenna dreamed of his father's voice. A king who rules without love rules only until fear grows tired. He knew then, exile was not punishment. It was preparation. 1 month into Chukwudi's reign, the moon turned red. The elders whispered of omens. That night, a protest erupted in the market square. Fishermen, farmers, mothers, they carried no weapons, only anger. Chukwudi did not come out. Udoka did. He ordered the guards forward. Steel met flesh. By dawn, 7 villagers were dead, including a boy who once played at the palace gate. The blood soaked into the earth, and the ancestors turned their faces away. The Queen Mother's warning. Queen Ifunanya, now clothed in widow's white, demanded an audience. She stood before Chukwudi without bowing. "You rule by borrowed blood," she said. "Do not forget that." Chukwudi's eyes darkened. "I rule by survival," he replied, "and survival has no patience for nostalgia." She left the palace shaking. That night, she sent a message to Ikena. 3 words. "Come home carefully." Udoka stood atop the palace wall, watching torches patrol the village. Power felt close now, so close. Yet something gnawed at him. Chukwudi did not share power. He used it. And Udoka realized too late, he was no partner. He was a tool. But tools can cut both ways. In the darkness, Udoka smiled. Revenge, he knew, was best served slowly. Crops began to fail, rivers flooded unpredictably, shrines went silent, the elders argued behind closed doors. They had crowned a king, but they had awakened a storm, and somewhere between exile and palace walls, Ikena began to walk back toward Obodo Ukwu, not as a prince, but as a reckoning. The night Ikena returned to Obodo Ukwu, the wind howled like a grieving widow. He did not enter through the palace gate. He came through the farmlands, barefoot, dust-covered, wearing the clothes of a common man. Farmers recognized him first. They froze, unsure whether to kneel or run. Ikena raised his hand gently. "Do not bow," he said. "I am not a prince." But word spreads faster than fire in dry grass. By dawn, the village knew. Women left their huts to look at him. Old men whispered his name. Children stared with wide eyes. This was the son who listened. The one who settled disputes without whips, the one who slept on bare earth during the trial. Ikena did not make speeches. He sat in the village square and listened, and what he heard broke him. Men flogged for owing taxes, shrines torn down, families divided by fear. "The king rules like a stranger," an old woman said, tears cutting paths through dust, "and strangers do not love land, they take from it." That night, the square filled quietly, no drums, no chants, just bodies, waiting. Udoka knew before anyone told him. Spies whispered in his ear, "Your brother has returned." The people gather around him. Something cold settled in Udoka's chest. He had told himself he hated Ikena because of the throne. But the truth was uglier. The people had never feared Ikena. They had trusted him, and trust was power Udoka would never own. Udoka went to Chukwudi at once. "The village is turning," he said. "Your rule is cracking." Chukwudi's face remained calm, too calm. "Then we remind them who holds the blade." Udoka hesitated, for the first time since their alliance began. "If blood is spilled again," Udoka warned, "the land will curse us." Chukwudi turned slowly. "You already live under a curse," he said. "You just haven't accepted it." In that moment, Udoka knew, if he stayed loyal, he would burn with the kingdom. If he moved against Chukwudi, he might still claim something. Not the throne, but revenge. At dawn, palace guards stormed the square. They seized Ikena. Women screamed. Men rushed forward, but stopped when spears were raised. A proclamation was read. Ikena, son of Nduka, is accused of inciting rebellion and plotting regicide. The charge was a lie, but lies spoken by power walk like truth. Ikena did not resist. As he was dragged away, he spoke only once. "Do not fight for me. Fight for the land." Those words spread faster than fear. Ikena was thrown into the earth prison, dark, damp, forgotten. Chains bit into his wrists. That night, a visitor came, Udoka. They stared at each other through the torchlight. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Udoka whispered, "You should have stayed away." Ikena laughed softly. "You should have told the truth in the forest." Udoka flinched. Silence pressed in. Finally, Udoka said, "Chukwudi plans to execute you, publicly." Ikena met his eyes. "And you came to warn me, or to watch." Udoka's jaw tightened. "I came because if you die, there will be nothing left to save." That night, Udoka unlocked the cell. Not out of love, out of guilt and fear. Udoka rallied a faction of guards loyal to the old bloodline. The plan was simple. Remove Chukwudi, place the elders back in power, restore order. But Chukwudi was never simple. Someone had warned him. Before Udoka reached the palace chamber, alarms sounded, steel clashed, fire erupted. Udoka fought like a man already dead. But numbers do not respect bravery. He was captured before sunrise. Brothers at the end. Udoka was dragged into the courtyard. Ikena, recaptured during the chaos, was forced to kneel beside him. Chukwudi stood above them both. "Two sons of one father," he said coldly. "Both failures." He turned to the guards. "At dawn, execute them." The crowd gasped. Queen Ifunanya collapsed. But before the guards could move, the earth trembled. Not violently. Deliberately. A deep crack split the palace courtyard. The sacred Iroko tree shed its leaves in one breath. The sky darkened. The diviner fell to his knees screaming, "The land rejects this king!" Panic exploded. Chukwudi stepped back for the first time. Fear flickered across his face. Voices rose, not in praise, in defiance. Guards lowered their weapons, elders shouted, women wailed ancestral chants. Chukwudi looked around and realized he had won the throne, but lost the land. He fled before sunset, not crowned, not chased, exiled by rejection itself. Udoka lay wounded, bleeding heavily. Ekena held him as the noise faded. Udoka laughed weakly. So, in the end, no king. Ekena shook his head. No, a lesson. Udoka's grip tightened. "Forgive me," he whispered. Ekena bowed his head. "I already did." Udoka died before dawn. The land was quiet, not healed, but breathing again. When morning came to Obodo Ukwu, the sun rose gently, as if unsure it was welcome. The palace courtyard still bore the scars of the night before, cracked earth, broken spears, ash where fire had kissed mud walls. But the people did not rush to clean it. Some wounds must be seen before they can heal. At the center of the courtyard lay Udoka's body, wrapped in white cloth. A prince who never became king. A brother who chose wrong too many times. A son who died knowing it. Women wailed softly, not in anger, but in mourning for what might have been. Ekena sat beside Udoka's body through the night until the elders came. His eyes were hollow but clear. Chief Elder Okpara spoke first. The land has rejected violence, it has rejected deception, and it has rejected borrowed blood. He paused. By right of survival, by voice of the people, and by the silence of the ancestors, the throne returns to you, Ekena. A murmur moved through the crowd. Slow, careful, hopeful. Ekena stood slowly. Dust clung to his knees. He looked at the throne, then at his brother's body, then at the people. And he shook his head. "If I sit on that throne," Ekena said quietly, "it will be built on graves." The elders stiffened. "The kingdom needs a king," one protested. Ekena turned to them. "No, it needs healing." Gasps spread through the crowd. He stepped forward. "My father loved us too much and forgot to teach us restraint. The elders loved tradition more than truth. And we, my brother and I, confused blood with destiny." He gestured to the palace. "That throne has eaten enough sons." Silence followed. Heavy. Then an old woman stepped forward, the same one who had spoken in the square days earlier. "Then teach us a new way," she said. That day, for the first time in Obodo Ukwu's history, the crown was buried, not passed, not hidden. Buried beneath the Iroko tree whose leaves had fallen when the land rejected Chukwudi, the diviner wept as he lowered it into the earth. "Let power rest," he whispered, "until wisdom is ready." The kingdom would be ruled by a council of elders and representatives, farmers, hunters, women, and healers. Not forever, but until the land itself chose again. Ekena did not take a title. He became a voice. Far from Obodo Ukwu, Chukwudi wandered. No village would accept him. Word had spread. That is the king the earth rejected. He lived long enough to understand the truth he had ignored. A throne taken without love does not follow you into exile. When he died years later by a riverbank, no drums announced it. Only water flowed on. Indifferent. Udoka was buried at sunset. Ekena stood alone at the grave after everyone left. "You were not evil," he said softly. "You were afraid." The wind moved through the grass, as if listening, as if forgiving. Years passed. Children grew hearing the story, not of a great king, but of 3 sons. One who loved power too much, one who loved revenge too deeply, and one who loved the land enough to let go. They learned that leadership was not seized, it was endured. And when the Iroko tree bloomed again years later, elders said, "Perhaps the land is ready to choose again." But even then, no one rushed. Some lessons must last longer than crowns. In Obodo Ukwu, huts still stood of mud and thatch. Fires still burned at dusk, drums still spoke at festivals, but never again did they forget. A kingdom does not die when a king falls. It dies when pride rules, truth is silenced, and blood replaces wisdom. And so the village lived, scarred, wiser, still standing.